Nice. Okay, here we go. What do you notice about this building? Well, I noticed the following, that it is like huge. It's like huge. Okay, so this photo was taken, I believe, 1838. It's one of the very first photos. It was done by the inventor of this style of photography, and this is one of his earliest photos, and quite possibly one of the earliest photos with people in it. It may be disputed, but 1838, my gosh, it's amazing. But what is really amazing to me is the building. Also the fact that I don't believe it's really one of the first photos of such of a structure. Now, these things are filled in at this point already, and if it is the year 1838, I find it interesting that you see more of these back then. Oh, it's just a decoration. I don't know. I think it had a purpose. Symbolic, maybe. I mean, this is probably symbolic. We've seen this before, kind of a compass square thing going on there. There's I don't know, at one point I thought maybe it's like a speaker hole, like for kick butt subwoofer, but maybe not. So let's move on and see what else we've got here. Let's see, I'm going to open with, well, I'm using preview, but that's what worked before. I'll try it. Maybe I can just kind of scroll through. But the size of it, I mean, okay, the windows go below the ground, and I understand that can be, look how they turned one of these windows into doors. Like, yeah, that's the ticket, it's a door. It's just interesting, though, to me. That's on the screen capture. Let me see if I can just do this like this. Bear with me here. I'll just click away, I guess. This one we opened. Oh, we didn't see the whole. Okay, so the doors. Yeah, I mean, look at this. You gotta look at this. That's my Lonnie Quinn impression. You gotta look at this. This is a huge door, and this may be for, it may be for horses to go in and out, but look at this door. And I bet you this door goes, I bet you the real size of this door is like there. I bet you it goes underground. I only know this from my research I've done so far, that in almost every case, it goes down. I mean, the dead giveaway is, it probably goes even further down. The dead giveaway is these windows, they go like that, So, what's going on here? Now, if these aren't speaker ports, I don't know. I just don't know. But that's the point. We don't know. But we're going to find out. Oh, yes. We're going to find out. What else I got here? This one we haven't seen. So remember how big the other door is? And then this is for the horses. Now, think about it for a minute. If there were giants before the flood, or shortly after the flood. And they built buildings, and those buildings were subsequently flooded, either in a local flood or the worldwide deluge. What would it look like? Well, it kind of looked like this. Don't you think? I think so. Now this is rather interesting here. What's going on here? Is there trickery happening here? Why does the horse and the man, why are there these green, like, hologram? Were the wagons really like this? I mean, it seems like there would be a wheel in there. What? Why all this open space? Wouldn't you want to have room for a bag or something? Curious. Very curious. Even the horses got smaller. But I was thinking of, this is like the pet door for this thing. And by the way, this is the City Hall in Paris, France. Okay, so it got burned down, of course. All the cool, awesome buildings you're seeing in this video were burned down. And I know, you look at this and you think, my gosh, what a fire hazard. If you got matches anywhere near this thing, you're out of your mind. That stone will just light up, right? No. No, I don't think so either. So, moving on. In some ways, I want this to be a long video, and in some ways, I don't, only because this is take 2, and I did this awesome, epic video that I did everything right, but QuickTime decided to just show one image. But I'm going to take another look at that door. I mean, because this one was huge. Like, you don't need a bigger door than that. The biggest thing you move in and out, that you would have to move in and out, let's say an elephant. You could fit an elephant in there. If you had a party that had an elephant in it, you know? And we're back. So, where were we? So the City Hall is also the Hôtel de Ville, and that's in Paris. So we have put these headphones over here. (1357) is when it was supposed to be made, but of course it was reconstructed and expanded in 1533. So that they always say that it was built, you know, every generation, it's already there, but it's expanded, or it's reconstructed, or it's refurbished. Sometimes they have the excuse of a fire, sometimes not. So watching Flat Earth British, Martin Liedtke, and others kind of got me thinking on the subject quite a bit. And what I like to do when I'm trying to solve a hoax, I have a guitar here that's reverberating. I'll move it somewhere else. I have guitars everywhere. That one was hanging on the wall. Whenever I think of, okay, this could be something, I'm going to test out this theory, or maybe this thing is a hoax, whatever. I consider the implications, if it were indeed true what somebody is saying. Because usually you do hear it from somebody else first, that this or that is a hoax. Very rarely do you discover it on your own, although it happens. And I was terrible at that when I was younger, but I've been given grace or understanding, whatever, wisdom to be able to know the difference between something that should be acceptable and something that should not. Well, history, I'm telling you, from where I'm at in my research, history should not be accepted on the face of it. It should be scrutinized to the max. And anything that comes from the authorities ought to be scrutinized in general anyway. But so how did I test this theory? Well, I typed in a search engine. I just typed in this. And before I click on it, what would you expect to find? You type in City Hall 1850 before the fire. What would you expect to find? Kind of older, smaller, probably more so wooden structures, right? The city halls that you see today are not that great. Many of them are these ancient structures, these possibly antediluvian structures built before the deluge. But certainly in the United States, for example, you would expect to have more rustic, pioneer-style structures, right? Kind of log cabin-ish. Not Cavendish, cabin-ish. And if it's not a word, I just coined it, so back off. But that's not at all what we find. Now, it wouldn't be surprising in Europe you have stuff like this. Sure, you expect that. Why not? Yeah, it's Europe. Hey, that's how it is in Europe. That's what you get. But what do we see? We see this. And again, I want to reiterate, I would expect 1850 smaller populations. I would expect smaller buildings. I would expect more wood than anything else. Not certainly. I wouldn't expect less wood to be used than today. You wouldn't expect steel structures. Well, this is what we get. And you get a lot of interesting things come up, but not what you would expect, right? You get these flat earth style domes out the wazoo everywhere. I mean, they knew the shape of the earth, the pillars, the flat surface. The earth is round, all right. Yep, it's round and hemispherical, the dome, the atmosphere, the atmos hemisphere. I don't know that it's actually spherical. I tend to question that, but it would be the most structurally strong and sound shape to be, I believe, but maybe a little bit egg-shaped, kind of like this. But yeah, that's what you see. You see that stuff. But you wouldn't expect to see that. Maybe this is what you would expect to see. Oh, I can't click on that. I get fooled sometimes by the screen captures. You would expect, and I can pull that one up. You may expect, oops, cancel. I just want to preview them. Did I close out of that? Yes, yes. Quick look. Yes, yes. That's my Jeff Goldblum, The Fly impression. Yes, 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 yes. Sorry to creep you out there. That movie is just creepy. But hey, what would you expect? Where is it now? I, for one, would expect, there it is, something along these lines. From this distance, the way this is drawn looks a little bit more rustic, and it's what you are trained to think of, 1850 to 1871, right? So this is Chicago before the fire of October 8, 9, and 10, 1871, supposedly. Well, what did that really look like? Well, They have aerial panoramas for us to look at. Aerial photography, panoramic, 1858, way before the fire. And it doesn't look so rustic now, does it? My suspicion with a lot of these buildings, the antediluvian style mud flooders, we call them, my suspicion is that pretty much every town, every city had them. Some of them are still buried completely. Some of them were wiped off the map completely in the deluge, but others remain. And the size of human beings at that time, at various times or various locations, well, for lack of a better term, varies quite a bit. And there's a picture. I don't have it ready. I'll stick it in here later, I guess. But they're skeletons, or just kind of showing the height of different humans from 38 feet tall down to like modern man. And it makes sense that you start off with a perfect genetic code. You can breed people a little bit bigger than that by removing genetics, and then you can breed people smaller, but people would naturally become smaller with the inbreeding and removal of genetics. But it can go both directions a little bit larger. Like in the case that you take wolves, every dog comes from wolves. Great Danes are bigger than wolves, but how do you get a Great Dane, or how do you get any breed of dog from a wolf? Sad to say, sorry to say, inbreeding, loss of genetic information. So the fact that we are not 20 some feet tall, like Adam and Eve, I believe were inbreeding. Sorry, it's uncomfortable to mention or think about. But, well, after the deluge, 8 people. How do you get all these people? So it's a sin, but if there's, how would you explain it? I don't know. We weren't there, so we don't know exactly, but I do go by the Bible because it's been vindicated over and over again, no matter how ridiculous it seems. And I find that with all of these conspiracies, and this one is included, that it's always, like I say, to make it seem like the Bible isn't true and God doesn't exist. That's the why. Why would they fake space? To make it seem like the Bible isn't true and God doesn't exist. Well, why would they fake history? To make it seem like the Bible isn't true and God doesn't exist. Well, why would they hide these former societies and the antediluvian people? Well, it's the same reason that they would lie about the timeline and expand the timeline to proportions outside of the biblical framework, to make it seem like the Bible isn't true and God doesn't exist. That's what it's all about. And I could be wrong about it, but that's, if I had to hang my hat on something right now, it would be that easily. So let's go through what was there. By the way, the Paris City Hall today looks like this at night with the green wall wash. Looks like they downsized some things, but they could only, alter it so much. But it's fire, come on. I mean, yeah, you can burn the roof, but I don't know. I don't know about all these fires. Every single building we're going to look at was burned by fire. All right, so curiosity here. When I originally typed in Paris City Hall, this came up, Paris, Texas. I find with a lot of city halls, they have to justify, why is this magnificent, expensive, exquisitely built, fine stone building? And this is one of the worst examples of that. This is plain Jane, boring, small, dumb, stupid, small. Well, for the city of Paris, Texas, at the time when the city was founded, and this was basically already there probably, no matter what they say, it's pretty magnificent for that location. And you always find, Yeah, these circles, the columns. This thing, this looks like it was rebuilt. Who knows what was there before, I guess. But it still has many of the elements. The raised doorway, kind of built, sized up for like gigantic people. And I know many of you will say to yourselves, well, it's not for giants, you know. It's just to get things in and out. And the windows are, you know, just how they did windows. And they needed the high ceilings, you know, because there's no air conditioning. So you have to have a breezeway up above. And, well, what about heating it in the winter? You don't want the high ceilings. Then all the heat goes up there. You're just burning a fireplace. It'd be freezing. So all these were destroyed by fire. They oftentimes have the clocks. The clocks are oftentimes right around 4 o'clock, plus give or take a half hour. I don't know why Martin Liedtke, flat earth British, noticed it. And ever since he said that, I thought back and I thought, yeah. And then ever since he noticed it, I've been looking and yeah. Why? I don't know. I guess, you know, it's not 5 o'clock somewhere back then. But the size of these things, you know, and it just has that look that the ground surface, it was raised up. Now, nowadays, they say, oh, well, that's because they added a sewage system, right? So they had to raise the level of the ground. Sometimes they say, like in the case of the Strasbourg Cathedral, oh, when they built it, it was just so huge, it sank. It sank. It's somewhat plausible, I guess, but I don't know about that. Yeah. Let's get to the photographs now. This is the same Paris City Hall back then, way back when. There's always a lot of business going on in the tops of these buildings. And these were already filled in. The people just look tiny. And I know it's because of it's regal and they want to give the impression of the law and this and that and the other. But I'm not sure. So this one's in Toronto. This is one of the smallest ones that came up. The size of the floors are still pretty big. So staying in Canada, this is very tall. I think this is in Toronto as well. This picture is from the 1800s, or you know, I say that number 1800s. I don't know for sure. I don't even know if it's really the year that they say it is. I'm beginning to think that the Dark Ages are Dark Ages because they just added ages from out of the blue, just from nowhere, just to screw around with the timeline. Just like today, they're screwing around with the timeline. Why? To make it seem like the Bible isn't true and God doesn't exist. Probably. Maybe not, but probably, in my mind, at least. But this just kind of sticks out compared to these other ones. And one thing that I'm almost certain of is that, like, this roof is kind of the original style of whatever it was. But because we build buildings with flat roofs, and that's dumb. It's dumb. I don't know why anybody makes a building with a flat roof. Laziness, lack of imagination, I don't know. Because these shed water, and that doesn't shed water. I mean, hello? Have you ever owned a home with a flat roof? Worked in a building that had a flat roof? Yeah. You ever see a leak on the ceiling? Yeah, there you go. I know you know what I'm talking about. Maybe if you don't, you'll find out. So this structure, like, have you seen something like this built in your lifetime? Maybe, but probably not. Even though the population is way higher, way wealthier, we have better machines than we ever had, supposedly. The technology is better than it's ever been, supposedly. We're wealthier than we've ever been, supposedly. And this building is magnificent. But see this? And always the dome. Always the dome there. Flat Earth imagery. What a magnificent HD photo from the 1800s. I mean, look at this. I don't think this is part of the cathedral. It's a little bit big for one of these like Gilded era mansions. This stuff. And you probably live in a town or city that had buildings like this, and they're torn down, aren't they? Why? Or they're sitting there right now empty, just on the edge of being torn down, disused, abandoned, owned by some nameless, faceless, rich guy who lives in another city, who has no plans for the property. I know that that's probably true if you live at least in America, in a decent-sized area city, and look at these buried windows down here. See, like this, I would think would have had a peaked roof before, because I just don't think they were that daft. They probably just got knocked down, and then the idiots that come along later, us, build it like that. Look how out of place that thing is. But neat looking. Yeah, you can see there's just, it just goes back. It's just a strip. Why would they have built it up higher like that? And something else is the floors, they don't match, These older, yeah, this one's probably, I don't know. It's original up to about here, and then it got rebuilt. Or maybe here, and they compress the floors. They compress it for the short people. And these, I believe, they stay. The floors get smaller as you go up, and you get up here. But that could have just been like lofts or storage for these, what I believe, giant people that occupy it. But man, does that stand out? And of course, it's gone. In most of the cases, it's gone. They get rid of it, and why? To make it seem like the Bible isn't true, God doesn't exist. That's what I think. Flat Earth dome pillars, over and over again. You see it. Flagpoles, really? Are they? Maybe, maybe not. The scale. Look at the people. Just tiny. We're all like Vern Troyer, rest in peace, compared to, I think, the people who actually built this. People, I don't know, people, yeah, I guess people. I guess they were. Look how elevated this is. Because they're all wearing coats, and when you're cold, you want to go up a lot of stairs and get up into the wind a little bit more before you enter or exit a building. That's what designers do, and they're genius, right? No. And how high these ceilings are, because it's more fun to heat those spaces. I don't know. I really don't know about that. This could be like the Capitol building or the White House so easily. I think this might be in Pennsylvania, but I don't know. I don't know. It could be anywhere. That's the thing. Is this France? Is it South Africa? Australia has buildings. They have buildings like this. Could be Philadelphia. Could be Washington D.C. Could be San Francisco, except for the weather and such. Could be Norway. I mean, you see where I'm going with all that? Could be Russia, even. That's the point. Oh, it's a style of architecture. Oh, well, why are some things so out of place? And are they afterthoughts? What is this? Greece, Rome? Oh, United States. Oh, it's New York City. Is this the spire of the Strasbourg Cathedral? And the rest of the cathedral's buried under all this mud? Could be, because I'm telling you, the one spire, which is on, if you're facing the cathedral, it's on the left side. It's kind of looking like that. So yeah, and dome, or flat Earth dome. This is Australia. Do you think Australia, they brought over, I really hope this is Australia. I think it is. Do you think that in Australia they brought over prisoners and then they, built all this stuff real quick ahead of the population? The population came along later. They just were very, very optimistic about everything. They wanted this to last a really long time, but they burned it down, knocked it down, destroyed it, like all these buildings pretty much. Does that work in your mind? Does that, I don't know where this is, because now, see, that's the point. Like, I saw where this was when I was putting these photos together, but it slipped my mind, and by looking at it, I can't tell. I thought that said Queen, that's why I thought Australia, but now I'm seeing Sense. Nathan Hale sounds like an American name, and that kind of looks like an American flag, so this could be San Francisco. You see buildings like this, just, they're for giants, man, I'm telling you. Look at the scale of it. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, huh? Maybe I'm just off my nut. Maybe. What does that sound? Okay. Maybe I'm crazy, huh? Look at the size, the scale, the size, the magnificence of this. What is this? Is that from a pipe organ? Or are those pipes? Or is it just a chimney? The carved, the attention to detail. Amazing. And this is out in California, I think. Judging by the flag. I don't know for sure. You can't tell just by looking at it. Huge structure, though. Victorian London. London had a big fire. They all did, didn't they? That's to get rid of these. Look at that stand out. I mean, yes, a building can stand out. But my gosh, and it looks old. I'm sure it was supposed to be old at the time, but sometimes buildings look old when they're not supposed to be old. Where is that one? The White House. The size built for giants. Yeah. Abe Lincoln in a speech said that, just, without anybody batting an eye, about all the giants buried in mounds across the, the West. And by West, he meant like the Midwest, where he was from. I mean, why did they even call it the West back then? Really, let's kind of think about that now, because it wasn't the West. Was that as far as they thought it went? Were they lied to about how far out it goes? Way back when? I mean, of course, the government knew, and Louisiana Purchase heard that. I'm sure there were a lot of people in the know, but I mean, the average person, did they know about that? Did they know how far away that was? I guess so, but look at the city halls today. It's crap. Garbage. Let's see. Germany. So you see what I mean when it's like it was built for giants. And it just looks like, okay, you know, if 1,000 years, it would make more sense if there were 1,000 years that were not true. So this is really the year 1018 or something closer to that, right? Then we're only a couple thousand years away, you know, like 3,000 years away from the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel, you know, the whole world lived basically right around the spot where the Noah got off the ark, right? Which is, I believe, in Turkey. I think they found the ark. I'm going to do a video on it sometime when I properly research it. You know, then they split up because God confuses the languages. It makes sense with what we see. And God confuses the languages, and people in one family can't understand another family, because God wouldn't confuse the languages within a family. He wouldn't want to break up the family. But so the different families, they go around the world because, you know, all these people are there, but they can't really work together as well. So you kind of got to go fend for yourself. So you go out into the world, you know, and what are you going to do? You're going to walk around until you find a nice place to live and settle down where you can hunt, gather, and such. And you're still civilized, and you have heck of great technology because everybody spoke the same language and you know, it was closer to the antediluvian times, and so a lot of that probably had carried over, and so they could take photographs. I think maybe the photographic prints aren't what we consider today as photographic prints. But they weren't digital either, maybe. If they were, they wouldn't exist, so we wouldn't even have known about them. But maybe some of these, quote, drawings that we find are actually photographs, and some of them really do look like it. Like if you look at this here, I mean, doesn't that kind of look like a photograph? It's so well done. Yes, I know people can draw that well, but, you know, well, you don't know. That's my point, actually. You don't know. Look at this. This looks like this is even older. It's crazy. But it just looks like there's just a small number of people come in, and that's how it is with all these old photos when you get into this stuff. The smaller number of people come in, and they're just kind of like, oh, wow, gosh, I hope the giants are gone who lived here. Yeah, they all drowned in the flood. Okay, well, okay, good. Well, not good, but good, I guess. Whatever, we're going to live in their house. Just clear out all this slop and debris, dry it out a little bit, and make this our home base, you know, because it's like post-apocalypse, literally. Not like it is a post-apocalypse. And that's kind of what you see, you know. It's in all these really old photographs. But that's not our focus right now. Johannesburg timeline. Johannesburg, South Africa. It's discovered in 1806. What happens in the next 80 years? A guy finds a nugget, and another guy finds a nugget somewhere else, and the guy finds a reef, which is like the size of a mountain. And then 2 years later, all this other stuff starts happening. All these people move in, and they build, you know, they just go crazy building stuff, and you've got yourself this, because they needed a city hall, and more people were going to come from England because they found a reef, or they found some gold again. And it took 80 years, but then all of a sudden all these people come. So they have to get ready. So they build this building and they make it look really old. And by the way, there's just nobody here. There's a couple guys. And don't tell me that the rest of them are blurred out because they're moving, because this is a moving horse pulling a cart and it's just blurred only that much. And I don't know about this nonsense that we learned growing up, like Abe Lincoln had to sit there and have screws in his head or something to be still, because if they would be blurry otherwise, and it still was blurry. And yet 20 years earlier or 10 years earlier, they're snapping these huge HD photos in Australia, or else they're getting horses and things to stay still. I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. But of course, since this is pictured here, you know that it burned down. So after they built it and everything, they destroyed. They just got to keep the matches away from those stones, the carved, dressed, finished stone that they quarried and carved and hauled. They schlepped it there with prison labor, because you know how easy it is to control a large population of imprisoned slave labor with what? A whip and a musket. You and 3 other guys are controlling hundreds of angry, hungry, pioneer, forced slave laborers to build this immaculate, huge city hall so you can burn it down 10 years later. Oh, and by the way, it's built probably on a star fort. They spent all this extra time, money. I don't know what kind of economy they had there, just starting out, but they also had to run the Aborigines out, and treat them like crap too, just because, hey, that's what we do, right? That's how they operate, right? That's what they say. Oh, the more I think about it, it's ridiculous. It's offensive to my intelligence. It's offensive to my senses that I'm taught to believe that malarkey like this. Well, why are the homes sunken down? Oh, well, because of the sewer system, and it floods and they're sinking. And so what we're going to do is we raise them up by having people lift the buildings. And to prove it, we have a drawing. That's our proof. And the news reports about it happening. That's how we know that NASA landed on Mars again recently, right? Right. So let's read about this. So again, City of Chicago, founded in 1833, 200 people. Okay. And the next thing you know, age of photography, quote, begins, right? It didn't begin before that, they say. I don't think so. I think they had photography way before that. Way before that. The more I think about that, the more I look around, the more I'm convinced there are photographs from long before 1840s. But it's more difficult to get my own head around, and I'm sure if I become truly convinced of that, it'll be a difficult one to convince other people, although you've been lied to about so many different things besides the shape of the earth that you've lived on your whole life. How hard is it then to scrutinize, at least, and to consider things that may be ridiculous, right? Seemingly ridiculous. And it almost backfires on them after a while, or it does with me, that when they try to make something out to be ridiculous, it actually lends a little bit more credence to it. I at least have no problem looking into it, put it that way. I know they try to mislead you with that, but that's just to get it confusing, and I'm not letting it get confusing, am I? Are you still with me? I hope so. That's why I do this channel, and there are a lot of subscribers, and it's growing, and I think the reason is I'm not afraid to go forward, and I'm not waiting for approval, and I step out on some things, and I think a lot of people like that, to be along for the ride, I think, because who knows where it's all going. It's exciting. It's like Doctor Who. I used to watch that show a lot. I liked that show, and it's a universe of wonder, and everything's exciting, and it's orderly, and you always kind of run into a problem, like an enemy, and the enemy is deception, and the enemy is always overcome because the truth doesn't care about deception. The truth is always there. The truth is always for the taking, and it defends itself. But you have to just have the eyes to see it. So Chicago, widely regarded to be one of the fastest growing metro areas in the world. But why? Why not Milwaukee? Why not Toledo? Why not Buffalo? Why not other areas that are geographically located and fixed with the same advantages, disadvantages as Chicago? Why was Chicago that way? Because it was already there, I think. They mentioned the height of Chicago above sea level. That's just irrelevant. And they say, even though the population is growing, that so many 6% died a year, whatever, from disease. They didn't have a sewage system. They didn't have a working sewage system in the 1850s. Okay, well, a working system. Okay, and then how do you build sewers where the buildings already are? You raise the buildings. What? Raise, R-A-I-S-E. Okay. Over the next decade, they lifted it by hand, they say. They put them on roller skates and rolled them out to the suburbs, they say. And I'm not kidding. I'm ridiculous when this is what they're saying. They lifted with dozens of men, they lifted sidewalks, roads, dozens of, and anything else previously installed too low for a sewer system to run underneath. Ironically, many of the buildings were destroyed by the fire. Oh no! But it gentrified, and it said, we're not doing wooden frame buildings anymore. We're using brick and iron. So they lifted up the wooden frame movies. Yeah, I'm thinking it's like a movie. They lifted up the wooden frame buildings and removed them and drove them out of the city on a rail, on roller skates, actually. It was so common. I don't remember that. I don't see it. You don't see pictures of that. Well, that's because it was so common. It was considered nothing more than routine traffic. Buildings on roller skates, nothing more than routine traffic, of course. Of course I believe that. Oh, man. And from there, like, what else can you say? This is just a drawing, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful drawing. And these libraries where they have the ladders and such, I think that's just because they're occupying a home. It'd be like somebody 2 feet tall moves into your house, and then they have ladders for the shelves, right? Why weren't the books bigger? I don't know. They didn't have, it wasn't that. It was just, I don't know. Of course, I'm speculating, but I'm forced to speculate when so much is lied about. Do you want to know what's going on around you? Or do you want to be wide-eyed and ignorant? Today's Tom Sawyer. So that covers it. Everything I wanted to cover. I'm scanning around. Oh, this. Chicago courthouse. Just look at that thing. what is this? 3 epochs? What is this? Okay. A city that had 200 people in 1833, population of 200, had only grown to, 200,000, almost, just over 70 some years later. In the meantime, built this in what was considered the West, like a frontier land. People are still hopping on wagons, log cabins, Indians, Native Americans, they call them Injuns, and they're, at war with them, and they lived around there. They hadn't been completely driven out. Did you know? Let me ask you this question on the subject of Native Americans. When the settlers arrived, the Native Americans were there to greet them, right? They had populated the entirety of North America, right? And now where do they live? Well, they live on reservations, you'll say. Okay, well, some of them do. If you ask me, the reservations are scrub land, just the least interesting. Why can't Native Americans just roam free in any national park? Why is that not the case? Why can't we roam free in any national park? I ask as well. But my original question is, where is the furthest east location in the United States of America, all of the states, any of the states, the easternmost located reservation for Native Americans, operated by the Bureau of Indian Affairs? Okay, I'll tell you. Michigan, Wisconsin border. So the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and the border of Wisconsin. I think it's called Menominee. And if there's one that's further east than that, you let me know, because I'm not aware of it. But I had that question myself, so I looked it up. That's how I know. And it surprised me, honestly. But when I was thinking about it, I thought, gosh, I can't think of any. And I thought, well, there are casinos. And I was thinking maybe Tennessee. I was thinking maybe, no, I mean, Andrew Jackson drove them out. They're pushed westward against their will. And that's why most of the reservations are out west. Because there were tribes, each state, like you go to Pennsylvania and there are different tribes that are recognizable names there, I don't know what they are, but all you have to do is go to high school basketball games and look at the team, I don't know, Shawnee or Sioux or what, I don't know the different tribes, but there are a lot of tribes from around all the way down to Florida, all the way up into Maine. Where are those tribes' reservations? Oh, they're, nowhere. Or out west. And then you go out west and you look around at land there and you visit places like Santa Catalina Island and others. And then oh, that's cool. And a lot of people will say, gosh, I didn't know there's this really cool island just off of LA. Why don't more people know about that? I don't know. It's our little secret. It's really cool to go to. Okay. Man, but there are other islands. I think I've seen them on the map. Yeah. Well, okay. How many islands, how many sizable islands does California have? Do you know the answer to that? Well, let me tell you. 500 islands. Some of them are pretty big. Santa Catalina is not the biggest. Well, what the heck? What's the story on those islands? Oh, you don't want to know. Well, what is the story on those islands? Well, those islands were home to Native American tribes, almost without exception. Where are they now? Well, it's a sad story. Well, it always is. And what is the story? Well, they were driven out by force where they had lived unknown number of generations, at least 10, 15 generations maybe, just driven out by the United States Army or a militia or a corporation or ranchers or a single rancher who hired thugs. It doesn't matter. It's all legal. They never get in trouble. Native Americans driven out from where they, just imagine that. I mean, you live on an island, like you've seen maybe the movie Moana. It'd be like that. Some assholes come along, shove you out. This is ours now. What are you doing living on our island? Get the hell out of here. We're going to pillage, rape, murder, kill, all this stuff too. And if you're lucky enough to survive and you don't become a slave or whatever, we're going to just stick you out in some scrub land in Utah and let you live there, okay? And consider yourself lucky. And good luck, because you're going to need it. And get going before we start shooting at you again. And then, so they go out there, and of course all their history ends up getting lost, and it's just sad. And they're all mixed up, all these different tribes. It's just horrible. Who can blame them for looking at regular Americans thinking, what a bunch of assholes, you know? I mean, who can blame them? I certainly have mixed feelings about it. Of course, you know, I personally didn't do any of that stuff, but I also didn't even really realize it for a long time. I was just oblivious. I blame it on the fluoride, I guess. Vaccines and fluoride. Hey. But, and education, all that schooling. Did you know globes are not educational? Some of them, if you look at the bottom, there's a sticker, it says not to be used as an educational aid. I love it. But the Native Americans history, that's something else. So, on that note, we'll revisit that topic soon, very soon. And be good to each other, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Well, maybe that's not a good thing. I'll see you. No, you won't. I won't see you later. Take care. Ciao.